Good evening, and welcome back. Wherever you are right now, whether you are folded into a chair with something warm between your palms, or lying flat in the dark with this playing softly through one earbud while the other one tangled hours ago, and you have not bothered to fix it, I'm glad you are here. Drop a comment, leave a message, send something into the void. Tell me where you are listening from tonight. I read them all. I do not always reply quickly, but I read them all. Tonight, we are going somewhere old, older than old. We are going to the place before places had names, before names had mouths to speak them, before mouths existed at all. We are going to the beginning of the Greek cosmos, and we are going to follow it all the way through to the man, the god who stands at its center, who holds the lightning and the scales, who sleeps on a mountain and calls it governance. But here is the thing that most tellings skip over or sand down or dress up in golden light until it is unrecognizable. Zeus is terrified, has always been terrified. The king of all gods, the father of gods and men, the shaker of the earth and the lord of the white sky. He has been running from something since before his beard grew in. And what he is running from is not another god. It is not a monster. It is not even a prophecy, exactly, though prophecy is involved. What Zeus is running from is himself, or rather, the version of himself that his father was, and his father's father before that. The version that devours its children to stop them from growing. The version that mistakes control for safety and calls its own terror by the name of wisdom. We will get there, I promise. But first, we have to go back, all the way back. We have to start with chaos. The beginning, if beginning is even the right word for something that had no before, there was chaos. Not chaos in the sense you are probably reaching for. Not disorder, not noise, not the inside of a teenager's bedroom. The Greek chaos is closer to gap, to opening, to the yawn of space that precedes form. Some ancient sources describe it as a darkness, a formless void, but the most careful reading suggests something more like potential. Not emptiness, but the condition that makes filling possible. A breath held before the first word of a sentence that will eventually become the world. From this openness, this gap, this held breath, the first beings emerged. Not created, emerged. The distinction matters more than it seems. Creation implies an intention behind it, a craftsman's hand. Emergence implies something different, inevitability, as if the cosmos was always going to happen, and chaos was simply what it looked like from the outside before it did. Gaia came first, or came simultaneously, depending on which source you consult. She is the earth, not a goddess of the earth in the way we might say Poseidon is a god of the sea, as a kind of administrator or steward. She is the earth. The ground itself is her body. The mountains are the architecture of her bones. When the ancient poets speak of earthquakes, they speak of Gaia shifting in her sleep, and they do not mean it metaphorically. She is the oldest stable thing. The foundation before foundations had a word. With Gaia came Tartarus, the deep place, the abyss below the abyss, the underside of everything that would later be called below. And Eros came too. The first Eros, the cosmogonic principle of desire and connection, the force that would eventually make it possible for anything to combine with anything else. Without Eros, all the primordial beings would simply have existed alongside one another, like stones in a field, unrelated, inert. Eros is what turns proximity into relation. From chaos then came Erebus, the primordial darkness that fills enclosed spaces, and Nyx, the night. And here is where things begin to move. Because Nyx is not merely the absence of light. She is a power. She is one of the few beings in the entire Greek cosmos whom even Zeus later will fear to cross. She gives birth to things that will outlast everything else. Hypnos, sleep, Thanatos, death, the fates. We will come back to the fates. Everything comes back to the fates eventually. Gaia, meanwhile, without any partner, brings forth Uranos, the sky, who arches over her like a dome, like a tent, like an embrace that becomes a cage. She also brings forth Pontus, the sea, and the mountains. And then, because Uranos is there above her, vast and attentive, she takes him as her consort, and from that union, the oldest generation of gods is born. The Titans, 12 of them. Oceanus, who is the great river encircling the world. Chaos, who is the inquirer, the questioner of the universe. Crius, Hyperion, Lord of Light. Iapetus, who will become the father of Prometheus and Atlas and Epimetheus, and thus the grandfather of half of human suffering. Thea, Rhea. Themis, who is justice itself. Order given a face. Mnemosyne, memory. And we will return to her too, because she is quietly one of the most important figures in this entire mythology, and no one talks about her enough. Phoebe, Tethys, and last, Cronus, the youngest Titan, the one with the curved blade, the one his mother Gaia will choose. But before we get to Cronus, we have to understand what life was like under Uranos, because it explains everything. Uranos was, by most accounts, a terrible father. This is putting it gently. He looked at his children, the Titans, yes, but also the other children Gaia bore him, the Cyclopes with their single burning eyes, the Hecatonchires with their 100 hands, and he could not bear what he saw. His own children disgusted him, their strangeness, their power, their potential to become something he could not control. So he pushed them back, into Gaia, back into the earth from which they had emerged, into her body, into Tartarus, cramming them back into darkness. The sources vary on the mechanism. Some say he pushed them back into Gaia's womb. Some say into the earth itself. But the image is the same. A father so threatened by his children that he would rather they had never been born. Gaia suffered this, the pain of it, the weight of all those bodies forced back into her. And at some point, at the point all things have a point, she decided she had suffered enough. She made a sickle from grey flint, some say from adamant, the hardest of all substances. She called her children to her, those she could reach, and she told them what she needed done. She asked who among them was brave enough to do it. And here is the first of the recurring shapes in this mythology, a pattern that will repeat like a motif in music, recognizable each time it returns, even when the key has changed. She asked. She needed the courage of one who had nothing yet to lose. She needed the youngest, the least established, the one with the least to protect, and therefore the least to fear. Only Cronus answered. He took the sickle. He hid at the edge where sky and earth meet, where Uranos came to Gaia each night, and when his father descended, Cronus rose from concealment and castrated him with one stroke. The blood of Uranos fell into the sea and became the Erinyes the Furies who pursue the shedders of kindred blood. From the same blood and the sea foam rose Aphrodite, and Ouranos, wounded and retreating, cursed his son as he went. A father's curse. The shape of it was very specific. "You will suffer," Ouranos said. "What you have made me suffer. Your own children will rise against you. What you have done to me, they will do to you." A prophecy, a shape, a trap already being built. Cronus should have heard this and understood what it meant. He did not, or he heard it and understood only the threat, not the lesson. He became lord of all. He freed his Titan siblings. He ruled. And then, the same as his father before him, he could not let his children live. The age of Cronus is called the Golden Age in most later traditions, and it is worth pausing on the strangeness of this. The age ruled by a god who devoured his own children is the one humans remembered with the most nostalgia, the one they called golden. There is something in this that tells us more about nostalgia than it does about history. Nostalgia selects. It keeps what was pleasant and releases what was terrible. The Golden Age had no war, the poets say. No toil, no hunger, no labor for bread. The earth gave freely. The seasons were mild. People were happy. But those were the people. For the gods, for Cronus and Rhea, his queen and their children, the story was different. Rhea bore him children one by one. Hestia, first and eldest, the goddess of hearth and home, the still center of all domestic things. Then Demeter, the grain mother, the sustainer. Then Hera, already fierce, already full of dignity. Hades, Poseidon, and Cronus swallowed each one as they were born, because the prophecy of his father rang in him like a struck bell that would not stop ringing. If no child survives, he reasoned, the prophecy cannot be fulfilled. If no child grows, no child can rise against me. The logic of his father, the exact same logic, the exact same terror, wearing a different name. Rhea watched her children disappear into her husband's throat, one after another. She bore it. She grieved in silence, or not silence, because she's said to have cried out, to have wept, to have begged. Cronus did not stop. Cronus would not stop. And so when her sixth child came to term, Rhea did what mothers do when they are out of options. She went to the ones who knew more. She went to her parents. She went to Gaia and Ouranos, even Ouranos, the wounded father, the exiled sky, and they told her what to do. The birth of Zeus is not a clean story. It is a story full of substitutions and deceptions, a story in which the first act of the king of all gods is to be hidden. Rhea went to Crete, to the island, to the mountain Ida, or in some versions to Lyctos, and in others to the cave of Dicte. The sources argue about the geography the way sources always argue about geography. And there, in secret, she gave birth to Zeus, a baby, a child, the thing that would eventually be called the father of gods and men, lying small and new and wailing in a cave in Crete, while his mother wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and carried it back to Cronus. Cronus did not look closely. He swallowed the stone, and Zeus was left to grow. There are traditions about his childhood that are extraordinarily specific and also contradictory, which is itself a kind of truth. The nymphs Adrasteia and Io nursed him, some say, and fed him honey from the bees of the mountain and the milk of the goat Amalthea. And Amalthea is important enough that one of her horns, accidentally broken off, became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. because even the childhood furniture of Zeus tends toward legend. The curates, the young warrior priests, clashed their spears against their shields to drown out the infant's cries so Cronus would not hear them. An entire support structure of concealment, an entire infrastructure of protection built around one child's survival. Zeus grew. This is the part that the myths compress into a sentence and move past. But it deserves more attention than it usually gets. He grew in a cave, on a mountain, without a father, without brothers, without the society of Olympus that would later be his domain. He was raised by nymphs and goats and the clashing of bronze. He was raised in hiddenness. And when you are raised in hiddenness, what you learn, the bone-deep lesson of your earliest years, is that the world is not safe for you, that you must be concealed to survive. That power in the hands of those who have it will destroy you if it can. How much of Zeus's later behavior traces back to this? I find myself thinking about it more than I probably should. The king who married 6 times, who fathered children in disguises, who kept secrets even from his queen. Is some of that the scar tissue of a childhood spent hiding? I don't know. The myths don't say. But I don't think it's nothing. The Titans ruled for ages. Time under Cronus was strange. There was plenty, but it was a plenty purchased with blood. The swallowed gods existed inside their father in a kind of suspension, neither dead nor free, present in some terrible in-between. The world above prospered, the world below was held. Cronus had allies among the Titans, or at least Titans who had no reason to oppose him. Oceanus held his course around the world. Hyperion carried the sun across the sky. The machinery of the cosmos functioned. From the outside, nothing was wrong, but the stones sat in Cronus's stomach and did not grow. And in the cave on Crete, Zeus did, when he reached his maturity. And the timing of this is never specified exactly, which is itself interesting, as if the moment of readiness does not belong to any calendar. He sought out a way to free his siblings. The tradition that most sources follow involves the Titaness Metis, whose name means wisdom or cunning or counsel, the same word used for practical intelligence, the intelligence that knows how to navigate obstacles rather than simply naming them. She was the first wife of Zeus, or the first consort, or the first great ally, depending on the version. It is Metis who gives him the emetic, a herb, a potion, some mixture that will make Cronus vomit, and Zeus, in disguise, as a cupbearer in some versions, as a mortal servant in others, gives it to his father. Cronus vomits. Out comes the stone. First, the stone that was never a child but was always a placeholder. And then, in reverse order of their swallowing, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, the 5 eldest children of Cronus and Rhea, disgorged and blinking into a world they had never properly seen, full grown as they had been swallowed, divine and furious. They were not grateful, exactly. They were grateful, yes, but gratitude was secondary to the fury. They had been inside a god's stomach. They had been swallowed. That does something to a person, even to a god. And so the war began. The war that would end the Titan age and usher in the Olympian one, the Titanomachy. 10 years, the tradition says. 10 years of war between the Titans and the gods, who would be Olympians. 10 years is a number that recurs in Greek mythology with suspicious frequency. It is also the duration of the Trojan War, the standard measure for a great and exhausting conflict. And it probably means something like a very long time, long enough to change everything, long enough that the world itself was altered by the fighting. The Titans had age and power and the inertia of things that have always been. The Olympians had fury and the freshness of things that have never been allowed to exist. They were evenly matched. The cosmos buckled and shook. Mountains were used as weapons. The sea boiled. Tartarus rang with the impacts. There is a description in Hesiod's Theogony that tries to capture the scale of it and only partly succeeds, because the scale is genuinely beyond description. The noise of the Titan war was such that the earth groaned and the starry sky screamed and the sea seethed in its bed and the great waves rolled to shore from every direction at once. But Zeus had an advantage that his opponents did not expect, because they did not know about it. He went down to Tartarus, to the deepest place, to the prison where Uranos had locked the children Cronus had also feared, the Cyclopes, the one-eyed smiths, the makers of extraordinary things, and the Hekatonchires, the 100-handed ones, whose strength was so tremendous that Uranos had been afraid of it. Cronus, after his victory, had left them there, had not freed them, had feared them the same way his father had. Zeus freed them. The Cyclopes, in gratitude, gave him what they could make. They gave Hades a helm of darkness that made the wearer invisible. They gave Poseidon his trident. And they gave Zeus the Thunderbolt, the lightning, the weapon that would define him for all of later history, the weapon that would become his symbol and his signature, and eventually, when the philosophy caught up, the symbol of divine power itself. The 100-handed ones joined the war, and with them on the Olympian side, with rocks that could fill the sky with stones the way a normal army fills it with arrows, the Titans began to lose. One by one, they were defeated and cast into Tartarus, the Hekatonchires set to guard them. The imprisoned, now the guards of the imprisoned. A cycle that the cosmos seems to enjoy. Atlas, who had led the Titan armies, was given a special punishment. He was condemned to hold the sky on his shoulders forever, the sky that he had fought to own. The Titan lords who had not fought, or who had sided with Zeus, Oceanus, Themis, Prometheus the clever, were spared, each in their own way, each with their own complicated aftermath. The age of the Titans was over. The age of the Olympians had begun. The division of the cosmos that followed the Titan War is one of the central acts of Greek mythology. 3 brothers, 3 realms, 1 world to divide between them. Some say they drew lots. Some say Zeus chose first, being the liberator, and the others chose after. The tradition of drawing lots is more frequently repeated, and it has a quality of justice to it, a randomness that no one could later accuse of favoritism. They reached into the helmet of darkness, Hades' own gift, the one the Cyclopes had made, and pulled out their portions. Zeus drew the sky, the overarching realm, the upper air, the domain of weather and thunder, and the watch over all. This is his, and he holds it not as a king holds a territory, but as a king holds the fact of kingship itself. It is his nature, not merely his address. Poseidon drew the sea, the grey-green depths, the shipways, the storms that cross between sky and water, the earthquakes that result from the sea's depths pressing against the foundations of land. Hades drew the underworld, the deep places, Tartarus and the fields of the dead, the rivers Styx and Lethe, and Acheron and Phlegethon, the machinery of what happens after. The earth they held in common. Gaia was not theirs to divide, or could not be divided, but the arrangement of realms gave each of them a sphere of absolute sovereignty. What followed was not peace exactly. The Olympian order was never peaceful, but it was order. It was a structure within which the cosmos could function and humans could be born and heroes could do what heroes do and disasters could be survived and stories could accumulate. Hestia took no domain. She asked for the hearth, the center point of every home, the communal fire, the thing around which all human gathering orbits, and she received it. She sits at the heart of every household and is the first and last to receive offerings. She is the still point of the turning world, and she knew enough to ask for that instead of a throne. Demeter received the grain, the harvest, the turning of the seasons as they relate to growing things. She is not merely agricultural. She is the fact that the earth provides for those who live on it. And when she withdraws that provision, the world discovers very quickly how dependent on her it is. Hera. Hera received the dignity of the highest place beside her brother and husband Zeus. She is queen of the gods. She presides over marriage and the sanctity of vows and the lives of women in their role as wives. She also holds, more quietly, a fury that nothing in the mythology will ever quite extinguish. And the others came as children of Zeus were born, and the structure of Olympus grew, and the 12 chairs around the great table were filled, and the cosmos settled into the shape that mythology has spent 3,000 years describing. But underneath all of it, underneath the golden halls and the nectar and the ambrosia and the easy majesty of divine governance, underneath all of it, the secret lived. Let me collect the thread here, because this is where the story turns. This is the hinge point. Everything before this is the world being built. Everything after this is the world living with what it built. The secret belongs to Metis. Metis, who gave Zeus the potion that freed his siblings. Metis, whose name is wisdom and cunning both. Metis, who became the first wife of Zeus and who carried his child, and who, when Zeus consulted the oracle about what that child would be, received an answer that should have changed everything. The child Metis carried, the oracle said, was destined to be more powerful than its father. A son, specifically, would be more powerful than Zeus, would depose him the way Zeus had deposed Cronus, the way Cronus had deposed Ouranos. The wheel, the terrible wheel, generation overthrowing generation. Zeus heard this prophecy, and Zeus, who had spent his childhood hiding in a cave because his father feared exactly this, made the same choice his father had made, the choice his grandfather had made, the choice that seems to be the only one the powerful know how to make when faced with a threat to their power. He swallowed Metis, whole, swallowed her while she was still pregnant, took her inside himself before the child could be born. The logic was the same as Cronus's logic. If the child cannot be born, the prophecy cannot be fulfilled. And additionally, I want to pause here and note how strange this part is. and I am not entirely sure what to do with it, but it seems important to mention. The swallowing of Metis is also the moment when Zeus absorbs wisdom itself. Metis, whose name means counsel and intelligence, becomes part of Zeus from that moment on. Some traditions say that this is how Zeus became so much wiser than the other Olympians, because Metis advises him from within, from inside his own skull. This is one of the stranger images in Greek mythology, the king of the gods with the goddess of wisdom living inside his head, whispering. But the child did not disappear. The child grew inside Zeus, inside his skull specifically, and the headache that resulted was described as catastrophic, a splitting, a cracking sensation that no divine remedy could relieve. Hephaestus, the smith god, struck Zeus's head open with an axe or a hammer, and from the wound, fully formed and fully armed, clad in gleaming armor and already crying the war cry, came Athena. Athena, born from her father's head, containing in some sense the wisdom of her mother who was absorbed before her birth. Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom and warfare and craft and strategy, all the things that Metis represented, inherited and extended, dressed in divine armor and given a name. The prophecy was not quite thwarted. Athena was not the child the oracle had warned about. She was a daughter, and daughters are always the part the patriarchal tradition overlooks, the way daughters are always the part the paranoid patriarch overlooks. She was not a threat to Zeus's throne, not in the way the oracle intended. The son was never born. The wheel, for once, stopped. But at what cost? Metis was inside Zeus forever, and Zeus had become, in the act of swallowing wisdom, the thing his father had been, the one who devours his children rather than faces his fear. He had broken the cycle. He had also repeated it. The gods established their households. They quarreled and reconciled and quarreled again. Zeus took Hera as his queen in the most official sense, and their marriage was the template for every marriage in the world that followed, full of passion and betrayal and fury and devotion, and the particular kind of contempt that people who have loved each other for too long develop alongside the love, never replacing it but living right next to it. Hera is not simply the wronged wife of mythology, though she is that. She is also the force that refuses to be diminished. Every time Zeus goes outside their marriage, every nymph, every mortal princess, every goddess he takes to bed in whatever disguise the story requires, Hera responds with an intensity that shakes the earth. She is, in some ways, the most honest figure in Olympus. She never pretends the wound doesn't hurt. Poseidon built his halls under the sea. He loved the ocean and the horses. The horse is his creature. They emerged from the sea foam in some traditions, are made of something like wave energy. And he brought the earthquake as a kind of signature. He is moody. He is competitive. He holds grudges with extraordinary commitment. Across years, across decades, across the entire span of epics. Hades is underrepresented in the mythology that reaches us, which is partly because the Greeks avoided saying his name if they could help it, referring to him as the unseen one or the wealthy one, because Pluto, the rich one, referred to the wealth that comes from the earth's depths, grain from below the soil, metals from below the stone. Hades was feared the way death is feared, which is to say, constantly and at a level too fundamental to be entirely conscious. He sits in his kingdom and receives every human who ever lived and ever will live, and he is impartial in a way that makes him arguably the most just of the three brothers. He does not play favorites. He does not chase mortals for fun. He largely wants to be left alone with his kingdom and his queen. His queen comes later. That story is its own wound in the world. The point is that the order held. The 12 Olympians arranged themselves across the mountain and across the realms and across the functions that cosmic governance required. And the world below them, the world of mortals, began in earnest. The creation of human beings is a story with more versions than almost any other in Greek mythology, and this abundance of versions is itself meaningful. Something about human origins is genuinely uncertain, even within the tradition. Were humans made from clay, from the earth itself, spontaneously, by a titan, by a god acting alone? Most resonant version involves Prometheus, son of the titan Iapetus, whose name means forethought. He had sided with the Olympians in the Titan War, or at least had not fought against them, and so he survived the Titanomachy with his freedom intact. He lived on the margins of Olympus, present enough to observe the gods, independent enough to form his own views. His own views were, as it turned out, sympathetic to humans. The Olympians had been given their domains. The animals had been given their characteristics: fur for warmth, talons for catching, venom for defense, speed for running. When Prometheus's brother Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, which is a joke embedded in the very genealogy of the myth, distributed gifts to the creatures of the earth, he gave so generously and so carelessly that when he reached humans, there was nothing left. Humans had no shell, no claw, no venom, no special speed. They were naked and slow and vulnerable and cold. Prometheus gave them fire. He took it from the forge of Hephaestus on Olympus, or stole it from the sun itself in some versions, carrying the ember in a hollow fennel stalk, and he brought it down to human beings. And with it, he brought not just warmth, but the entire chain of consequence: cooking, metalworking, ceramics, the beginning of technology, the capacity to alter the world rather than merely endure it. Zeus was furious. This much the tradition agrees on, but the sources argue about the sequence and the reasons. The Hesiodic tradition places Zeus's anger specifically in the context of a divine assembly at Mycenae, where Prometheus tricked Zeus in the division of the sacrificial animal. He split the ox into 2 portions, wrapped the good meat in the stomach lining to look unprepossessing, and wrapped the bones in gleaming fat to look rich, and let Zeus choose first. Zeus, who knew what Prometheus was doing, chose the fat and bones anyway, either because he was deceived or because he wanted a pretext for punishment, and the sources have never agreed on which. Either way, Zeus withheld fire from human beings, and Prometheus stole it back for them. And the punishment was vast. Hephaestus made chains from adamant, the hardest of all metals. The gods bound Prometheus to a rock, a cliff face in the Caucasus, the easternmost edge of the known world, the place where day begins. And each morning an eagle came to eat his liver. And each night, because he was a titan and immortal, the liver grew back, and each morning the eagle returned. The same wound, renewed, the same violation, perpetual. Aeschylus wrote a trilogy about this. and only the first part survives. And in that first part, Prometheus is absolutely still, absolutely unrepentant, while the gods of the sea and the wind come to express their sympathy and ask him to yield, and he will not yield. He knows something. He is the god of forethought, and he knows something that Zeus needs to know. The identity of the woman who will bear a child more powerful than Zeus, not Metis. That was resolved after a fashion, a different threat, another version of the same prophecy. Some say Prometheus knew that Thetis, the sea nymph, was destined to bear a son greater than his father. This information was valuable enough that Zeus eventually bargained for it, eventually sent Heracles to kill the eagle and break the chains, and Prometheus, freed, gave up the secret. Don't marry Thetis. Let her go to a mortal. Let the son of Thetis be mortal too, and thus no threat to divine order. The son of Thetis was Achilles, and that is a story for another day, though its shadow falls everywhere in this one. The punishment of Prometheus was accompanied by a punishment for humanity. This is where Pandora enters, and where the story of human suffering acquires a shape. Hephaestus made her from clay and water, a woman of impossible beauty, given gifts by every god on Olympus. Athena taught her weaving and craft. Aphrodite gave her grace and longing. Hermes gave her a quick mind and a tongue full of flattery, and, some say, a deceptive heart. They dressed her and adorned her and named her Pandora, all gifted, and they sent her to Epimetheus, the afterthought brother of Prometheus, as a gift. Prometheus had told his brother, "Accept no gifts from Zeus. Do not accept anything." Epimetheus, whose whole name is his own warning about the limits of wisdom applied after the fact, accepted her anyway. She brought with her a jar, or a box, in the tradition that Erasmus later mistranslated into the version we all know. A large storage jar, a pithos, sealed. Inside it, well, the tradition is not entirely consistent here, and I will tell you both versions, because the difference between them matters. In one tradition, the jar contains all the evils of the world: disease, sorrow, poverty, misery, labor, everything that afflicts human life. Before Pandora opened it, humans had lived without these things. After she opened it, they were loose in the world, and nothing has ever gathered them back in. In another tradition, and this is the one I find more interesting, and I am not sure why it is less often told, the jar contains blessings, good things, and by opening it, by letting them out into the air, humanity lost them. They scattered before they could be grasped, and what remained in the jar, clinging to the inside of the lid, was only hope. In either version, hope remains. Olympus, trapped at the bottom of the jar, preserved. Why? The myth does not explain whether hope is a good thing or a cruel one, whether its preservation is mercy, or whether it is the cruelest trick of all, giving humans the capacity to believe in a future better than their present, while all the other evils are already loose in the world. The myth refuses to answer. It leaves the question open like a wound that will not close. This too is Prometheus's legacy, a world full of suffering and full of hope in equal measure, and no guarantee that the hope is not simply a longer form of the suffering. The world after Pandora changed. The sources agree on this, even when they disagree on everything else. Hesiod gives us the clearest account of the ages that followed, the theory of the 5 races, or 5 ages that describes the moral and material arc of human history as a story of decline. He does not call them ages in the way we might expect. He calls them races, genae, generations, and each one is associated with a metal that tells you something about its character. The first race was golden, made by the Olympian gods in the time of Cronus, which is interesting given everything we know about what was happening among the gods during that time. The golden race lived without toil or sorrow. The earth gave freely. They did not grow old. They died as if falling asleep and became the daimones, the spirits who watch over humans, the benevolent presences who witness and intervene in human affairs. The second race was silver. These people were a lesser thing. Their childhood lasted 100 years, long, dependent, slow to develop, and their adult lives were brief and full of violence. They were too proud to worship the gods, too foolish to honor one another. Zeus destroyed them, and they became the blessed dead who dwell under the earth. The third race was bronze, made of bronze and nothing else. Bronze from the ash trees, hard and violent, and interested in nothing but war. They destroyed one another. They went down to Hades without names. The fourth race is the anomaly. Not a metal race at all, but the age of heroes, the demigods, the ones who fought at Thebes and at Troy, the ones whose stories fill the mythology. Hesiod inserts them here because they interrupt the neat decline. They are, in moral terms, superior to the bronze race even if the world had already begun its slide. They die in their wars, or they are transported to the Isles of the Blessed at the edge of the earth. And then the fifth race, the Iron Race, which is us. The age Hesiod himself lived in, which he described with palpable exhaustion. An age of labor and pain and injustice, where the good are not rewarded and the wicked are not punished, where the gods no longer walk among men, where shame and righteous anger have fled the earth and there is nothing left but endurance. There is something almost unbearably melancholy in Hesiod's description of his own age. He sounds like a man who knows things used to be better and cannot stop knowing it. The gold is gone, the silver is gone, even the heroes are gone, off to their islands at the edge of the ocean. What remains is iron, and iron rusts, but the cycle also implies, and this is the consolation the myth carries under its surface, that cycles cycle, that the age of iron is not the final word, that somewhere in the turning of time, another golden age is possible. Whether this is truth, or whether this is merely the hope that Olympus, trapped at the bottom of the jar, whispers to anyone who holds the jar close enough to their ear, that too the myth refuses to say. There is a man who stands at the boundary of the mythological and the legendary in a way that no other figure quite manages. He is the child of a god and a mortal woman. He is the greatest hero in the Greek tradition. He is, in many ways, the answer to the question of what a human being can be when the divine potential in them is fully expressed. He is also one of the most tragic figures in any tradition I know of. And the tragedy is not incidental to the greatness, but inseparable from it. His name is Heracles, Hercules in the Latin tradition, which is how most people encounter him first, and which colors the encounter in ways that are sometimes misleading. His origin is the kind of story that makes Hera's fury understandable, even when her targets are undeserving. Zeus came to Alcmene of Thebes while her husband Amphitryon was away at war, came to her in the shape of Amphitryon himself, so perfectly disguised that Alcmene had no reason to know. From that night, she became pregnant, and Zeus, who wanted this child to be great, extended the night, held back the dawn for 3 days, some say, so that the child conceived in it would have the strength that so long a night could give. When Alcmene gave birth, she bore twins, Iphicles, the son of her husband Amphitryon, mortal in all the ways that matter, and Heracles, the son of Zeus, divine in potential, if not in fact, half divine, half human, the exact combination that produces the Greek hero. Hera knew. Hera always knew. She had been tracking Zeus's infidelities with the dedication of someone who has decided to document every wound. And this one was worse than most, because this one was deliberate, because Zeus had gone out of his way to extend the night, because he cared about this one, about what this child would become. Hera tried to prevent the birth. She sent Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, to delay Alcmene's labor, and sat her outside the birth chamber with her knees crossed and her fingers laced together, a magical posture of blockage, of preventing passage. For 7 days, Alcmene labored in agony. It was a servant who eventually tricked Eileithyia into uncrossing her legs, releasing the blockage, and Heracles was born. He was born already the greatest hero. The strength was in him from the beginning. In the stories, as an infant in his cradle, he strangled the snakes that Hera sent to kill him in the night. 2 enormous snakes, the kind that could have killed a grown man. Iphicles screamed. Heracles, in the dark, in the crib, killed them with his hands. He was found in the morning holding the corpses, happy, having decided by some infant logic that they were toys. He was sent to be educated, as the sons of noble houses were educated. He learned music from Linus, who struck him once for playing incorrectly, and whom Heracles killed with the lyre, accidentally, having not yet learned his own strength. He learned driving and wrestling and archery. He herded cattle on the mountain Citharon. He grew into the shape of himself, enormous, disproportionately strong, capable of feats that no one before him had managed, and that no one after him quite matched. He married Megara, daughter of the king of Thebes, and for a time was happy. The 12 labors came from what happened next. Hera sent madness upon him, a divine madness, temporary, overwhelming, and in the grip of it, he killed his own children, and in some versions, Megara too, his wife. When the madness lifted, the sight of what he had done was unbearable in a way that the myths try to describe and cannot quite reach. He went to the oracle at Delphi. The oracle, Apollo's oracle, the voice of the god of truth and prophecy, and also, always, of the distance between what you ask and what you hear, told him to serve Eurystheus, king of Mycenae, for 12 years, to perform whatever labors Eurystheus set him. This was his punishment. This was how he would be purified. The 12 labors are known well enough that I will not rehearse every one in detail, but I want to linger on a few of them, because they are not simply tests of strength. They are encounters with the structure of the world, with the things that should not be possible, but are. The Nemean lion, whose skin no weapon could pierce. Heracles strangled it and wore its skin as armor for the rest of his life. The invulnerable became his protection. The Lernaean Hydra, which grew 2 heads for every one that was cut off. Heracles and his nephew Iolaus worked together, cauterizing the stumps before new heads could grow, until finally the central immortal head was severed and buried under a great rock. The Augean stables, fouled beyond cleaning, Heracles diverted 2 rivers through them and cleaned them in a day. He did not merely match the impossible. He found ways to change the terms on which the impossible was attempted. He went to the underworld. He caught Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guards the gates, and brought him to the surface, alive, and showed Eurystheus, who was so terrified he hid in a bronze jar. He went to the garden of the Hesperides at the edge of the world and came back with the golden apples. He held the sky for a moment while Atlas went to fetch them. This is the image I keep coming back to. Heracles standing in Atlas's place, the entire weight of the heavens on his shoulders for the brief time it took the Titan to pick some apples. And then by a trick, or by his own cleverness, he gave the sky back and took the apples. He freed Prometheus. This is rarely emphasized enough. One of the 12 labors, in some traditions, was the killing of the eagle that tormented Prometheus, the breaking of the chains, the liberation of the Titan who had suffered for millennia on behalf of human beings. Heracles, the greatest human, freed the one who had given humans fire. There is a symmetry there, and it is the kind of symmetry that myths achieve when they are working at their best. Not arranged, not planned, but discovered, as if it was always there and someone finally saw it. He was, in the end, betrayed by a centaur he had already killed. Nessus the centaur, wounded by Heracles' arrow, the arrow tipped in the Hydra's blood, the most venomous thing in the world, told Heracles' wife Deianira, as he was dying, that his blood was a love charm, that if Heracles ever strayed, if she ever feared losing him, she should anoint his robe with the centaur's blood, and his love would be secured. She believed him. Later, when she feared exactly that, when Heracles sent a captive woman home ahead of him, and Deianira recognized the signs of his affection, she anointed his robe. She sent it to him as a gift. The centaur's blood was not a love charm. It was poison. The Hydra's venom in the blood of the centaur doubled in virulence by the time she used it. Heracles put on the robe and the poison began to work, and the agony of it was beyond anything he had ever felt, beyond the labors, beyond every monster he had fought, because this was not a monster. This was not something he could strangle or shoot or divert a river through. It was inside his skin, and it was burning through his divine blood. He built a pyre. He lay down on it. He had his companion Philoctetes light it, or in some versions, he lay down on the pyre and commanded it be lit, and no one would light it, until Philoctetes agreed and received the hero's bow as his reward. The pyre burned. The mortal half of Heracles burned away. And what remained, what Hera could not touch, finally, what outlasted all of her fury, was the divine part. He rose to Olympus. He was reconciled with Hera, made peace with his tormentor in the way that sometimes happens when the tormented become powerful enough to no longer need the tormentor's approval. He married Hebe, goddess of youth. He became a god. He was the only human to achieve this. The achievement has a quality I find myself hesitating to articulate. because every way I try to say it comes out flat. He suffered more than any other hero in the tradition. He was cheated, betrayed, driven mad by a god's hatred, made to kill the people he loved, and he became immortal through it, not despite it, but partly because of it, because the labors that the madness made necessary were what stripped away the mortal layer and revealed what was underneath. The cost of his divinity was everything that had made him human. Odysseus is the other hero I cannot leave out, even though his story belongs to a later age, to the aftermath of Troy, to the long journey home that is itself an argument about what kind of human being survives in a world full of gods and monsters and years spent far from everything you love. He was the son of Laertes, king of Ithaca, though there is a persistent tradition that his real father was Sisyphus, the trickster king, the one who cheated death twice, who is now rolling his boulder up the hill in Tartarus for eternity, and that the cunning Odysseus inherited from his true father explains a great deal about him. His birth was ordinary in all the ways that matter and extraordinary in the ways the myth cares about. He was born into a royal house on a small rocky island that demanded cleverness to survive, surrounded by sea. He was raised to know that Ithaca was not the richest place or the most powerful, and that surviving near the powerful requires being smarter than them. His mentor was Athena. This is the choice that defines him more than anything else in his story. Not that he was clever, not that he was brave, but that the goddess of wisdom and craft and practical intelligence chose him as her particular favorite. She was his guide in the Trojan War, his protector in the journey home, the one who appeared to him in disguise and tested him and argued with him, and when she could, cleared his path. The relationship between Odysseus and Athena is one of the most fully realized divine mortal relationships in the mythology. She admires him because he is most like her. He admires her because she represents the version of himself he is always striving toward. At Troy, Odysseus was not the greatest warrior. He was not Achilles, not Ajax, not Diomedes. He was the one who came up with the ideas. The Trojan horse was his. The wooden horse filled with soldiers, the gift that wasn't a gift, the final strategy that ended 10 years of war. The Iliad is full of moments when Odysseus says the unsayable thing, challenges kings, manages egos, keeps the alliance intact through sheer rhetorical force when it should have collapsed. He is not loved by everyone at Troy. He is needed. His return journey takes 10 years for reasons that come down at the deepest level to one. Poseidon hates him. He blinded Polyphemus, the Cyclopes, who was Poseidon's son, and Poseidon, who holds grudges the way the sea holds salt, pursued him across the entire Mediterranean, driving him off course, wrecking his ships, delaying and diverting him at every opportunity. What he encountered in that 10 years is a catalogue of the world's dangers. The lotus eaters who offered oblivion, the Cyclopes, the winds of Aeolus in their bag, Scylla and Charybdis, the island of Circe, who turned men into pigs, the descent to the underworld, where he spoke with the dead, the sirens, the cattle of the sun, the island of Calypso, who kept him for 7 years. Every one of these is a test of a different kind of resilience, and every one of them he survived by using not his strength. He is not particularly strong, but his mind, comes home to find his house full of suitors who want to marry his wife, Penelope, and assume his throne. He comes home disguised as a beggar because Athena made him so. He comes home and tests his own house before revealing himself, watches how people treat a beggar, watches who is loyal and who is not, watches Penelope's patient, extraordinary resistance before he unmasks himself. Penelope is the figure in this story who deserves her own 1,000 words. She waited 20 years. She unraveled her weaving each night so that she would not have to finish it and be forced to choose a suitor. She kept the hope alive and kept the wolves at bay through a combination of intelligence and stubbornness, and the particular kind of faith that is not certainty, but the refusal to act as if the thing you're waiting for is definitely not coming. When Odysseus finally reveals himself to her, she makes him pass a test even then because she is Penelope. The reunion is described with an economy that leaves the reader to do the work. After 20 years, the silence of coming home, the particular rest. His legacy is the idea that surviving is itself a heroic act, that the journey home matters as much as the war, that the mind, used well, is the equal of any sword. Achilles is the contrast, the foil, the anti-Odysseus, who is also somehow the greatest of all the heroes at Troy. I have been holding off on him, circling, because there is something about Achilles that does not yield to summary. The moment you condense him, he disappears, and you have a sketch of a figure where there was a person. His mother was Thetis. The sea nymph Zeus had wanted and given up because of the prophecy that her son would be greater than his father. Peleus, a mortal king, married her by catching her while she shape-shifted. A mortal man restraining a divine woman through the trick of holding on while she became everything else: water, fire, serpent, lion. And from their union, Achilles came, already marked, already the child the prophecy had circled. Thetis knew what his fate held. She knew he would go to Troy, and that if he went, he would be glorious and brief, that if he stayed, he would be long-lived and forgotten. She tried to prevent the first. She brought him to the court of Lycomedes, dressed him as a girl, hid him among the princesses, and Odysseus, because of course it was Odysseus, always Odysseus when clever plans are being made and undone, came to that court with a trader's bag full of gifts for ladies, and tucked into the gifts was a sword. Achilles reached for the sword. The disguise was over. He chose. In some sense, he had always already chosen. The brief glory over the long silence. His whole character is oriented toward the former so completely that the choice does not feel like a sacrifice. At Troy, he was the best of the Greeks, fastest, strongest, most beautiful, most feared. The Iliad does not begin at the start of the war, but at the moment when Achilles withdrew from it, because the point the Iliad is making is that Achilles' absence changes everything, that the war without Achilles is a different war, a lesser war, a war the Greeks are losing. He withdrew because of Agamemnon, because Agamemnon, the king of kings, the one who held the whole alliance together through the weight of his position rather than the force of his personality, took Achilles' prize, the woman Briseis, to replace his own, which he had been forced to give up. The insult was not the woman exactly. The insult was the demonstration that Agamemnon considered himself above the rules that bound everyone else. Achilles, for whom honor is not an abstraction, but the only currency that matters, could not endure it. He sat by his ships and burned while his friends died. He came back for Patroclus. Patroclus, his companion, his other self, the person who stood closest to him in the world. Patroclus had taken Achilles' armor and gone into battle disguised as Achilles, because the Greeks were dying and something had to change. Hector killed him. Hector of Troy, the greatest Trojan warrior, the one who was fighting to protect his city and his family, the one who knew he would lose. When Achilles heard Patroclus was dead, the grief that came out of him is described by Homer in the Iliad with an urgency that has not aged. He poured ashes on his head. He cried out, and his mother Thetis heard him in the sea and came to him, and could not save him, because no one could save him from this. He went back into the battle. He killed Hector. He dragged Hector's body behind his chariot around the walls of Troy 3 times, 7 times, again and again, which was understood even by the Greeks as going past the boundary of honor into something colder and darker. His grief had become a kind of madness. It was Priam, Hector's father, the old king of Troy, who eventually came to Achilles in the night, alone, across the battle lines into the enemy camp, and knelt before the man who had killed his son and asked for the body back. And Achilles, looking at this old man, felt something shift. He saw his own father in Priam, his own mortality, his own coming death that Thetis had already told him was near. He wept. Priam wept. They wept together, these 2 enemies, one for Patroclus and one for Hector. And then they ate together, and Achilles gave the body back. This is the moment at the heart of the Iliad. Not a battle, a meal, 2 men on opposite sides of a war weeping for their dead. Achilles died soon after, as the oracle had promised. An arrow from Paris, guided by Apollo, the god who had always opposed the Greeks, struck him in the heel, his one vulnerable place. He fell. He was glorious and brief. He was more famous in death than any of the heroes who survived. His mother had made him invulnerable, in the tradition that Ovid preserves. She had dipped him in the river Styx, holding him by the heel. The heel she held was the heel that was never dipped, the heel that was mortal while the rest of him was not. The thing the myth keeps saying, in the body of Achilles, is there is always a heel, the place where the protection does not reach, where the human remains, no matter how divine the rest. There is a woman I want to spend more time with than I usually see given to her. Medea. She comes after Troy, in the chronology of heroes, or alongside it. She belongs to the generation of Jason and the Argonauts, the quest for the golden fleece that precedes the Trojan War, by a generation in the mythological timeline. Medea was the daughter of Aeetes, king of Colchis, on the eastern shore of the Black Sea where the sun first rises, at the far edge of the known world. She was also a sorceress, a practitioner of arts that the Greeks called pharmaca, drugs, remedies, poisons, the same word for healing and for harm, because the Greeks understood that these were the same thing applied differently. She was the granddaughter of Helios, the sun, and her power had a solar quality, absolute, blinding, unconcerned with the things it passed over and burned. Jason came to Colchis for the golden fleece, which hung in a sacred grove and was guarded by a dragon that never slept. Aeetes agreed to give it to Jason if Jason could complete certain tasks. Yoke fire-breathing bulls, plow and sow a field with dragon's teeth, defeat the army of warriors that grew from the teeth. These were impossible tasks. Aeetes designed them to be impossible. What he did not account for was Aphrodite and Eros, the arrows aimed at Medea by divine command, so that when she saw Jason, she fell in love with him with the kind of love that is impossible to distinguish from a wound. She helped him. She gave him ointments that would protect him from the bull's fire. She told him how to throw a stone among the warriors to make them fight one another. She charmed the dragon into sleep so he could take the fleece. She left with him. She left behind her home, her father, her entire world, and she left behind her brother Absyrtus. And this is the detail that the myth insists on, the detail that shows us who Medea was from the beginning and what she was capable of. She killed her own brother and scattered his body in the sea to delay their pursuers while Jason's ship escaped. She came to Greece, and she was magnificent and terrible. She restored Jason's father Aeson to youth with her arts. She tricked the daughters of Peleus, Jason's enemy, into killing their own father in a botched rejuvenation attempt. She removed obstacles the way fire removes obstacles, completely and without regret. Jason abandoned her. He abandoned her for a princess of Corinth, a political marriage that would give him a kingdom. He did this after she had given him everything: her loyalty, her country, her brother's body thrown into the sea, years of her power in service of his ambitions. He did this and explained to her with the tone of a man who has decided to be reasonable about the unreasonable, that she should be grateful for being allowed to live in civilized Greece rather than barbaric Colchis. Anyway, what she did next is the thing that makes Medea one of the most disturbing figures in all of Greek mythology. She killed his new bride. She killed the bride's father, and she killed her own children, hers and Jason's, the children she had borne, the children who would have suffered for what she had done, so that he could not have them, so that the line of his descendants would end with her act. This is where Euripides does something extraordinary in his version of the play, which is the version that shapes all subsequent understandings of this story. He makes Medea deliberate. He makes her wait and consider and grieve in advance for what she is about to do. He does not make her a monster who acts without thought. He makes her a person who thinks, who knows, who feels the full weight of it, and does it anyway, because in her logic, in the ruthless internal accounting she has constructed, it is the only response proportionate to the wound. I am not sure Euripides is asking us to agree with her. I am not sure he is asking us to condemn her either. He is asking us to understand, which is harder than both. She escaped in a dragon chariot. She lived afterward. She found her way to Athens, where Aegeus sheltered her. Her story does not end with Corinth, though Corinth is where the wound is. She continues being Medea, brilliant and dangerous, and entirely, devastatingly committed to the logic of her own grief. Her legacy is the question she leaves open. What does a person owe the one who destroyed them? The tradition has never agreed on an answer. It probably never will. The great war at the center of Greek mythology, the one all roads lead to, the one that the hero stories spiral toward and away from, is the Trojan War. It deserves its own epic treatment and has received it multiple times from Homer and Hesiod and the lost cyclic poets whose works we know only in fragments, from the playwrights and the Virgil writing from the other side of it, and every tradition that has touched this story since. But the beginning of the Trojan War is a story about a wedding, about an apple, and about the terrible efficiency with which beauty and judgment and divine vanity can combine to end a city. Thetis married Peleus at a great feast on Mount Pelion. All the gods were invited, all the gods except one. Eris, the goddess of discord, was not invited, for reasons that should be obvious and whose consequences demonstrate why the obvious reasons are sometimes insufficient. She came anyway. She threw a golden apple into the gathering, inscribed with 3 words, "For the most beautiful." 3 goddesses reached for it: Hera, Athena, Aphrodite. 3 goddesses who each had excellent arguments for their own preeminence and no intention of yielding the point. Zeus, asked to judge, was wise enough to know that picking one of his wife and daughters as the most beautiful was not a problem he wanted to live with, and he deflected. He sent them to the slopes of Mount Ida near Troy to be judged by Paris, the shepherd prince, the son of King Priam, whom Priam had abandoned on the mountain because of a prophecy that this child would destroy Troy. The child had survived. The shepherd had become a prince again. He was beautiful and young and had the particular quality of the young, which is the conviction that they can navigate anything. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera offered power and kingdoms. Athena offered wisdom and skill in war. Aphrodite offered the most beautiful woman in the world. He chose Aphrodite's gift. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen of Sparta, who was already married to Menelaus, who had been courted by every prince and king in Greece, and whose father had made all the suitors swear an oath to defend whoever married her against anyone who tried to take her away, an oath which Odysseus had suggested as the way to prevent war, and which turned out to be the mechanism by which war became inevitable. Paris went to Sparta as a guest of Menelaus. He took Helen. Whether she went willingly, whether she was taken by force, whether Aphrodite's influence removed the question of will entirely, the tradition argues. Homer's Iliad shows a Helen who is ashamed, and a Helen who is complicit, and a Helen who is both of these at once, and he does not resolve the tension because the tension is the point. Menelaus called in the oath. The kings of Greece assembled their ships and their armies. 1,000 ships, the face that launched them, the phrase that will outlive everything else in this mythology, in the English language, sailed for Troy. 10 years. The war at Troy is, at its core, a story about the cost of beauty and pride. Every character in it is paying some version of that cost. Agamemnon, who sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia at Aulis to get favorable winds for the fleet, and whose wife Clytemnestra will not forget this. Achilles, who chose glory over years and paid with everything. Hector, who fought to defend a city he knew was doomed, because surrendering would have been worse than dying. Ajax, who went mad when the armor of Achilles was given to Odysseus rather than to him, and killed himself in the shame. Cassandra, princess of Troy, who could see the future and was condemned by Apollo's curse to never be believed, who watched the wooden horse come through the gates and tried to stop it and was ignored. Cassandra is one of the figures I find most devastating in this entire tradition. She knew she had been given the gift of prophecy by Apollo, who wanted her, and when she rejected him, he left the gift intact and added the curse that no one would believe her. Every true prophecy she spoke was heard as madness. Every warning she gave was ignored. She knew about Paris and the war before the war began. She knew about the wooden horse. She knew about the fall of Troy. She could not stop any of it. The wooden horse, the great trick of Odysseus, the one idea that ended the war, built in the shape of the sacred animal of Troy's patron goddess, large enough to conceal a contingent of the best fighters, left at the shore while the Greek fleet appeared to sail away. Appeared to, while actually hiding behind a nearby island. The Trojans argued about what to do with it. Cassandra said, "Burn it." Laocoon, a priest, warned against it. A serpent came from the sea and killed Laocoon and his sons, sent probably by Poseidon, who was on the Greek side. And the Trojans saw this as divine condemnation of the warning. They brought the horse inside the walls. In the night, the soldiers inside the horse came out. They opened the gates. The fleet returned. Troy burned. The fall of Troy is described in fragments that have survived from the lost poems and in Virgil's Aeneid, which tells it from the Trojan side, and the image that persists is fire. Troy burning, the great city, the city that had stood for 1,000 years in the tradition, the city of Priam and Hector and Cassandra and Paris and all the others, reduced to ash while the gods watched. The gods had chosen sides. They had interfered throughout the war, fighting through their human champions, protecting favorites, abandoning enemies. Athena, who had supported the Greeks, turned against Odysseus after Ajax the Lesser assaulted Cassandra in her own temple. Athena did not protect her in the moment, but she did not forgive the desecration. The gods are not always just. They are powerful, and their favor is real, and their disfavor is catastrophic. But justice is a separate matter from power. The aftermath of Troy scattered the heroes in every direction. Some died on the way home. Some arrived home to find they had no home left. Agamemnon came back to Mycenae and was killed by Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus in his bath with an axe, a murder that his son Orestes would later avenge and whose consequences would be tried before a divine court in Athens. Menelaus and Helen reconcile somehow, which is the ending of their story that Homer hints at in the Odyssey. Helen's safe and beautiful and irreducible in Sparta, and what their marriage was like after everything is a question the sources decline to answer. And Odysseus sailed home for 10 years and returned to Ithaca and found Penelope. Let me pause here and be honest about something. I have been circling the center of this entire mythology, the thing the story title promised, the secret behind Zeus, and I have been doing it deliberately, because the secret requires everything around it to be visible before it makes sense. But I also want to say, because it is true, that I am not entirely sure how to approach what comes next without flattening it. Some things in mythology resist summary, not because they are too complex, but because they are too simple. The truth at the center is almost embarrassingly plain. The terrifying secret behind Zeus is this: he is his father's son. Not in the literal sense, though also in that sense. He is the child of Cronus and Rhea, the grandson of Ouranos and Gaia, born into a lineage of fathers who destroy their children to prevent being destroyed by them. He broke that cycle. He was the child who survived, who freed his siblings, who overthrew the Titan order, and then he rebuilt it. Not exactly, not in the crude form of swallowing children in the dark, but in the substance. He swallowed Metis. He absorbed wisdom rather than facing what it meant. He used the prophetic knowledge he gained from her to maneuver around threats rather than confront the structural violence that generated them. He became the king. He became the order. He became the thing that the world needed to be stable. And in doing so, he became the thing that stability requires, the enforcement of a hierarchy that benefits those at the top of it. The eagle that ate Prometheus, the chains in the Caucasus, the thunderbolt thrown at anyone who threatened the current arrangement. He is not a villain. The mythology is not interested in villains exactly. It is interested in the way that power reshapes the people who hold it, even the people who held it for genuinely good reasons, even the people who seized it from someone worse. Zeus is better than Cronus. Cronus was better than Ouranos. And yet each one, in holding the power, became a version of the thing they overthrew. The secret is not that Zeus is evil. The secret is that the wheel keeps turning, that the same patterns repeat, that every liberator becomes an establishment, that every father eventually fears his children, that the only thing that changes is the names and the shapes of the fear. And then, underneath even that, there is the deeper secret, the one that Prometheus knew and that Zeus bargained to find out. The prophecy was real. There would have been a son who overthrew him. If he had not stopped it, the wheel would have turned again. The only thing that ended the cycle was the prevention of the cycle's next revolution, which means that the order Zeus established is the order that was willing to do whatever it took to stop time, to prevent the next thing, to hold the wheel still through force. This is not peace. It looks like peace. It functions like peace. But underneath, it is the same thing that Ouranos did when he pushed his children back into the earth. The suppression of the generative force in order to protect what currently exists. The Greeks knew this. The mythology tells it straight. The king of the gods is a trauma survivor who became the thing that traumatized him, running the same programs his father ran, calling it order, calling it wisdom, sitting on his mountain with the goddess of wisdom murmuring inside his skull and mistaking that internal voice for his own insight. The terrifying thing about Zeus is not his thunderbolt, it is his familiarity. He is recognizable. Every institution, every system, every arrangement of power that presents itself as the natural order and then turns its mechanisms against anything that threatens to grow beyond its permission. That is Zeus. Every parent who devours rather than nourishes. Every establishment that absorbs or silences or breaks the challengers. Every moment when the liberator, victorious, rebuilds the walls that imprisoned him. The gods of Olympus held their council and their order for the span of what the Greeks called the heroic age, the age that produced Heracles and Odysseus and Achilles and the others we have been following through this telling. After the Trojan War, the tradition becomes less sharp. The heroes are gone or dying. The direct interventions of the gods become rarer in the stories. The world settles into something more like the one Hesiod described: iron, labor, endurance. Prometheus was freed. This matters more than it might seem, because it closes a loop that opened when Zeus swallowed Metis. Prometheus, who had given humanity fire, who had been punished for it with the perpetual wound, freed by Heracles, reconciled with Zeus, the information about Thetis exchanged, the wheel of divine paranoia interrupted, if not entirely stopped. Whether this represents Zeus growing into wisdom or simply Zeus making a pragmatic bargain, the tradition does not decide. Maybe both. Maybe the distinction is less clear than it appears. Thetis married Peleus. Her son Achilles was mortal in the end. The prophecy was avoided not by destruction but by displacement. The threat that might have destroyed divine order became instead the greatest human warrior, the most fully human of all heroes, the one who chose glory over years and whose story ended at Troy, the heel in the water, the heel that was not dipped. The gods aged. This is not something the mythology states directly, but it implies it. The late traditions show the Olympians becoming more remote, more formal, less interested in the day-to-day operations of the human world. The age of heroes was the age of direct contact. After it, the gods retreated into their functions. Artemis is the hunt. Aphrodite is desire. Apollo is the sun and the lyre and the plague arrow and the truth you cannot prevent yourself from knowing. They are less people and more principles. The mystery cults began. Eleusis, where Demeter's grief was enacted in the descent and return of Persephone, where the initiates were shown something. No one who was initiated ever revealed what they saw. And this is itself extraordinary, that an open-air culture full of storytellers and gossips maintained this secret for centuries, that changed the way they understood death. The Orphic tradition, which imagined a different cosmos, a Zeus who was also Dionysus, a soul that reincarnated through lives until it was pure enough to rest. The Pythagorean tradition, which found in number and music the structure of the cosmos that the mythology had described in story. The gods were being translated into concepts. The stories were becoming philosophy. What was a god now? What was the force that Hesiod called Zeus? The force that Homer described arguing with Hera about whether to spare Hector? Was it a person in the sky? A metaphor? A way of talking about the forces that shape human life, weather, desire, luck, death, in a form that gave them agency and therefore gave humanity something to bargain with? The question does not have an answer that the Greek tradition agreed on, but the question became a structure. The question became a way of thinking about the relationship between the visible world and the forces behind it. And from that questioning, eventually came philosophy in the full sense. Plato and Aristotle, and the whole astonishing project of Greek thought, which was in some ways the mythology continuing by other means. The myths traveled. They traveled first through the Mediterranean with the traders and the colonists, through Sicily and North Africa and the coast of Turkey, and into the Black Sea. They traveled with Alexander, who carried a copy of the Iliad annotated by Aristotle, and who styled himself a new Achilles, the hero of a new great war for the edge of the known world. They traveled with the Romans, who received them and renamed them, and in some cases deepen them. Virgil's Aeneid is a genuinely strange and moving piece of work. The Trojan War's aftermath, told from the perspective of the losers, the founding myth of Rome built on the ruins of Troy, and through the Roman Empire, they traveled into every corner of Europe and North Africa and the Levant. The arrival of Christianity in the Roman world created a complicated moment for this tradition. The gods were not entirely abandoned. They were demoted, renamed as demons or as saints, or as the poetic fictions of a lesser age. The temples became churches. The feast days were absorbed. The structure of the mythology, the divine drama, the human heroes, the moral architecture, was fitted inside a new frame that used some of the same load-bearing elements. But the mythology survived its absorption. It survived in the Latin texts that the monasteries preserved. It survived in the Arabic translations. It survived in the rediscovery that the Renaissance made of the classical world, and in the painters who put the Olympic gods in 100 altarpieces and ceiling frescoes, and in the poets who found in the old stories an inexhaustible source of shapes for the things they needed to say. Keats wrote about Lamia. Milton used the classical gods as a decorative register in Paradise Lost, while routing the central theology elsewhere. Shakespeare knew the mythology well enough to use it casually, assuming his audience knew it too. The Enlightenment found in the Greek concept of logos, reason, the ordering principle, a secular descendant of the divine order of Olympus. The Romantics found in Prometheus their central symbol, the creative rebel punished by convention, the firebringer against the gods of the establishment. We have not stopped. Every generation rediscovers these stories and finds in them the shapes it needed. Percy Jackson, which introduces children to the mythology in the form of a contemporary adventure story, is in direct continuity with the tradition of the rhapsodes who performed Homer in the Agora, making the old stories live again in a new idiom. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's Thor and Loki are Norse, not Greek, but they are using the same technology. The divine family drama, the royal succession crisis, the hero who is also a child of violence, trying to be better than the parent. I find something genuinely consoling in this. Not comfortable. Consoling is different from comfortable. The stories endure because they describe things that do not change. The fear of the father, the resentment of the child, the prophecy that cannot be escaped, the fire stolen from the gods and given to ordinary people who are cold, the woman at the jar's edge, hope clinging to the underside of the lid, the hero with the heel. These are not things that become less true over time. They are the shapes that human experience keeps returning to, the way water returns to the sea. There is a final thing I want to say about Zeus specifically, about the terrifying secret we have spent this entire evening approaching from the outside. I said earlier that the secret was his familiarity, that the pattern he represents, the liberator who becomes the establishment, the traumatized who becomes the traumatizer, the father who fears the child, was recognizable, was human. But there is something else, something that I have been turning over through this whole telling and cannot quite resolve. Zeus, from inside the cave on Crete, grew up knowing that his father had swallowed his siblings, knowing that the world he was being prepared to enter was one in which the people in power had made themselves powerful by destroying the people around them. He grew up with that knowledge, raised by nymphs and goats and the sound of bronze shields being clashed together to drown out his crying. And he changed things. The Titan age ended. The Olympians were freed. Prometheus eventually was freed. The heroes were born and did what heroes do, and the world was enlarged by what they survived. The mythology does not end with Uranos cramming his children back into the earth. It ends, if it ends anywhere, with the recognition that the wheel can be interrupted, that the patterns can be noticed, that the children can survive. The tragedy of Zeus is not that he failed. It is that he succeeded, mostly, and the success was not enough to prevent him from carrying the damage forward. He could not metabolize his own history. He could not turn his hiddenness in the cave into something other than a reason to be afraid of power he didn't hold. He could do extraordinary things, free the world from the Titans, establish an order in which humans could exist and grow and make the things they made, and still not be free of the thing Uranos put in motion when he first looked at his children and felt, rather than love, fear. This is the thing the mythology is trying to say about power, that even when it is won justly, it corrupts the processes by which it is held, that the liberator and the tyrant are made of the same material, and the difference is in what they do with the fear that power always generates, that wisdom, the Metis inside Zeus's skull, is not the same as healing. The Greeks never made this explicit. The mythology does not offer a solution. It offers only the shape repeated, the wheel turning, the prophecy pursuing the one who tries to escape it. But embedded in the shape is something like an invitation to see the pattern, to name it, to at least not pretend it isn't there. The gods are not going anywhere. They live in us, the way mnemosiny, memory, lives in the stories themselves, the way Prometheus lives in every fire lit in defiance of the cold. The way Penelope lives in every person who unravels their work at night to start again in the morning. The way Achilles lives in every human being who has stood at the junction of a long, forgettable life and a brief, blazing one, and reached without thinking for the sword. They are not dead. They are not metaphors, or not only metaphors. They are the shapes that our experience keeps taking, the recurring dreams of a civilization that is still, in some essential way, the same civilization that sat around fires on the plains of Greece and tried to tell itself the story of why things are the way they are. Zeus is afraid. He has always been afraid. He sits on his mountain with the lightning in his hand and the goddess of wisdom murmuring inside his skull, and the fear that made him hide in a cave on Crete has never fully left him. It only grew the way fear does when you give it a kingdom. And maybe that is not a condemnation. Maybe that is just the truth about what it is to be the one who holds the world together. The weight of it, the knowledge that underneath every order is the chaos it was built to contain, and that the chaos is not separate from the order but woven through it. The way the night is not the absence of the day but its own presence, Nyx with her own children, the fates and sleep and death clinging to the underside of the sky. Maybe the terrifying thing about the king of all gods is that he is still at the center of everything, the child in the cave, still hiding, still waiting, still afraid of what grows in the dark beyond the firelight, The wheel turns. The wheel always turns. Good night, wherever you are. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying through the whole of it. I know it is long. I know it is heavy. Some stories earn their weight, and I believe this one does. Though I understand if you found places where I was wrong about that. The jar is still on the table. Hope is still inside it, if the old myth is right. That is either a comfort or a cruelty, depending on the day you've had, and I do not presume to tell you which.